This was a modified version of WPIC 4.72. And I have it again, and it looks like it's fine to me. You guys all have this, I take it, because you had it before. This is what you want me to read? When we get to that point? Okay.
No objection from the state, Your Honor.
We'll do that.
The other motion that I wanted.
You may need to prompt me, though, because sometimes I don't forget. Go ahead.
Your Honor, there is a motion in limine regarding the handing off of the Pierce County Sheriff's Department investigation in this case. And the motion in limine was brought by Rankin. This motion in limine 13, and the court granted it in part and denied it in part. I just want to address it before we bring the witness in, so we can make sure that he's adequately advised of how the court wishes that to be addressed. What I have from the court's prior ruling is that granted to the extent that the reason there's anything other than ethical concern as opposed to any other kind of positive misconduct, you might say hypothetical. In other words, the fact that the investigation was handed off and the handoff was done based on the ethical considerations of avoiding an appearance of impropriety are not precluded by this rule.
Wait a minute. Hold on a second here. Okay, say that again.
As far as what the court previously stated.
Yeah.
Granted to the extent that the reason there's anything other than an ethical concern as opposed to any other kind of positive misconduct, you might say hypothetical. And then you said, in other words, the fact that the investigation was handed off and that the handoff was done based on the ethical considerations of avoiding the appearance of impropriety are not precluded by this ruling.
This was already talked about the other day, as a matter of fact.
It was.
I think it was raised by defense.
It was raised by defense, and Lieutenant Brockway is the lead detective on this case, and he's the one that primarily handed it off to WSP and took the steps to do so.
Oh, take it all back. What they were talking about yesterday was that the case was handed off from the city to Pierce County Sheriff's Office. This is having to do with the Pierce County Sheriff's Office handing it off to the Attorney General.
No, WSP in June.
Okay, WSP, the state.
And we could just address it with handed off the investigation without any reason for it being given.
Yeah, I indicated that they that I would grant the motion to exclude that there was a handed off to the state, except to because of any sort of hypothetical ethical concern that might be present, so that they would do it for that reason, and that would be fine. I don't know if there's anything more to it that the defense wants to go into. And you're just raising this now so everybody's on the same page about this?
Right, Your Honor. I just want to make sure the witness is adequately advised.
Right. So Mr. Osler's on his head like that's right. Mr. Arbenz too, that's still just one defendant. Okay. Ms. Bremner? And Mr. Purchase. So it looks like everybody's happy with that.
I can just have a minute to advise them, and then we'll be ready to be in front of you.
Sure. Okay, Susan, on the motion docket number 8 for tomorrow,
Is that the one that I just
I said fine. I sent you an email, but yes.
Okay.
Good. Glad they resolved it. Okay, are we ready? Stay ready? Okay, thank you, Mrs. Winnie. Let's get the jury. Welcome back, everybody. Please be seated. Okay, Ms. Nicolavo, your next witness.
State calls Lieutenant Hiram Brockway.
Yes, sir. This is important right about here. And raise your right hand and be sworn. Solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you very much, sir. Have a seat right here. Please state your name and please.
Lieutenant Byron Brockway, B-Y-R-O-N, B-R-O-C-K-W-A-Y.
Good afternoon, Lieutenant.
Afternoon.
Where are you currently employed?
The Pierce County Sheriff's Department.
How long have you been employed with Pierce County?
Over 27 years.
Did you have any prior law enforcement experience before Pierce County?
No.
Any military experience?
No.
the 27 years that you've been with Pierce County, can you take us through the positions that you've held up to your current position?
Yeah, I was a deputy in our Special Investigations Unit, which was responsible for drugs and vice. I was a deputy in a gang unit. I promoted to detective. I was assigned to Special Assault Unit. I also was assigned as a detective to robbery assault, and then a detective sergeant in major crimes, homicide, missing persons, officer-involved shooting investigations.
And when did you promote to detective?
2013.
When did you promote to detective sergeant?
It would have been 3 years later, around 2016.
And what did your duties include as a detective sergeant?
At the time, I was in major crimes, so I was lead on a lot of cases, and also had a team of detectives that would work on major crimes.
What type of crimes are included in major crimes?
Homicide, missing persons, and then we also, on our on-call, we might have an aggravated assault, shooting, assaults.
You also mentioned that you were involved in investigations of officer-involved deaths, homicides.
Yes.
And when did you start your involvement with that?
While I was a detective, I was involved with those. I don't have the year. Around the 2012-13, I was part of a team, and then I was involved more when I was a detective sergeant.
How, if at all, are the investigations on officer-involved deaths different from a homicide investigation, a general homicide investigation?
Repeat the question. So
When investigating an officer-involved death, is it different at all than investigating a standard homicide?
yes.
And how so?
We have a team that comes out and specializes in officer-involved shootings and in-custody deaths. So we have a team that's assigned, which includes forensics, detectives, detective sergeants, and that group is who would go out to officer-involved shooting or in-custody death investigation.
So it's a tighter, smaller team that specializes in that?
Yes.
And in Pierce County, with the investigations, you often have additional detectives that assist, even though they're in different divisions.
Yes.
You said that you're a lieutenant currently?
Yes.
When did you promote to lieutenant?
Around a year ago, coming up on 2 years now.
So in March of 2020, you were a detective sergeant?
Yes.
And what was your specific assignment at that time?
At that time, I was assigned to major crimes, so I was lead on a lot of homicides, missing persons cases, and involved in officer-involved shooting investigations.
Did you have the opportunity on March 4th of 2020 to become involved in the investigation of the in-custody death of Manuel Ellis?
Yes.
How did your involvement come about?
I was stepped up. I was a detective sergeant at the time, stepped up to lieutenant. I was covering our criminal investigations bureau as like the point of contact in a case of a major event. So I was called out on the 4th of March around 16 after midnight by Lieutenant Messinio.
Lieutenant Messinio works for Pierce County Sheriff's Department?
Correct.
You said that you were part of CIB?
Criminal Investigations Bureau.
And what is that?
It's a bureau of detectives that encompasses the Sheriff's Department, and it has different groups of special assault, robbery assault, homicide missing persons, and special assault unit.
And when you were contacted by Lieutenant Messinio, did you get a briefing from him of what occurred?
Yes.
And what did that briefing entail?
He told me he had been off duty with Detective Sergeant Sanders at the time and responded to a call in the city of Tacoma. Our officers had been struggling with a subject, and during the struggle, a taser had been deployed and hobble restraints had been used, and then medical aid was called for the subject, and the subject was deceased.
At any time did he advise you that the subject had also gone silent when he was in the custody of the officers?
Sustained.
What, if anything, did he advise you of the status of the subject prior to him being deceased?
Overall, you may answer. It doesn't go to the truth of the matter. It goes to what directed his investigation. You may answer.
Please repeat it so I...
What, if anything, did Lieutenant Messinio advise you of the status of the deceased prior to his death?
I don't recall exactly what he described on the phone. I found more detailed information later on.
And did you also keep notes from your phone contact with him?
Yes.
I'll come back to get those marked and refresh your recollection on that. What steps did you first take when you responded to the scene?
I called, made notifications. I called Lieutenant Lane with City of Tacoma, Tacoma Police. I called Chief Lawrence with our department, Lieutenant Roberts with our department. I also called Keith Barnes, investigator with the prosecutor's office.
Approximately what time did you arrive at the scene?
I arrived around 1:38 in the morning.
What observations did you make upon your arrival?
I parked east of the location where the incident had occurred on 96. It was dark at the time. There's some street lights on, cold, 40 degrees or so. And then the area was cordoned off with crime scene tape by patrol units from the city of Tacoma.
Did you notice at all, you said that it was cold, but did you notice at all if it was raining?
It missed it at some point, or the pavement had been wet, and then off and on wind as well.
You said that the crime scene was already around the intersection at that time?
I believe that, yeah, the crime scene tape was up, I believe.
Did you take any steps to preserve any of the radio traffic from that night?
Yes. As I back up, prior on the way there, I requested the radio transmissions from our Southside 911, which would be transmissions from deputies or officers that responded to the scene.
Will that also include transmissions that were broadcasted across the county versus just for those that responded?
Yes.
And did you take any steps to preserve any of the fire dispatch?
Those were retained automatically, but I got them later.
And what was your role in the investigation?
I was a lead investigator.
So when you arrived at the scene, who did you contact upon your arrival?
Lieutenant Messinio. I talked to Detective Sergeant Sanders, and then I had made a notification for a group of detectives or detective sergeants to come out, and they began to arrive as well.
When you arrived at the scene and contacted Lieutenant Messinio, did you also receive a briefing from him there?
Yes.
And do you recall what, if anything else, you received from him in that briefing, other than what you've already testified to?
No, I believe I covered most of it.
And did you make assignments to the fellow detectives?
I did. Detective Sergeant Cady, I assigned him to go to the Parkland Spanaway precinct for interviews. I also assigned Detective Moss at the time to assist with some photos of the involved Tacoma officers and our officers as well. Steve Wilkins, forensics also went there later on for those photos. Detective Holtz and Dos Remedios arrived later on in the investigation, went to Parkland to assist on interviews and photos, I believe. And Lieutenant Leffa Holtz, he was assigned as lead for the scene, the outdoor scene there.
So would that include for his assignments to direct both Wilkins and Mel for documenting the scene?
Yes, Steve Mel was also there as investigator for forensics.
And would Detective Leffelotz also direct on what was to be taken into evidence?
Yes.
At that time, had you been made aware of the names of the individuals that potentially had been hands-on with Mr. Ellis?
Yes.
And who were you made aware of?
During my briefing with Lieutenant Messinio at the scene, he told me that Tacoma Officer Rankin, Tacoma Officer Collins, Tacoma Officer Burbank, and Tacoma Officer Ford.
Any Pierce County sheriffs that were hands-on?
Detective Sergeant Sanders had been present during part of the incident and did grab Mr. Ellis's foot.
And what was Lieutenant Messinio's status as far as being at the scene?
He was close in proximity to Detective Sergeant Sanders, and so witnessed part of the incident.
When you arrived at the scene, was Lieutenant Messinio in control of the scene prior to your arrival?
Yes.
Had an identity of Mr. Ellis been made at that point?
Yes.
Who did you receive that information from?
I believe that was from Lieutenant Messinio as well.
When you arrived at the scene, did you make any observations of if there were any hobbles at the scene?
No.
Did you ever learn of any hobbles at the scene?
Yes.
How did you learn of them?
During the interview with the officers, I think it was Burbank, that during that interview.
To your knowledge, were a set of the hobbles taken into evidence that night?
No.
And are you aware if the patrol vehicle was processed at all for evidence?
I don't know. Lieutenant Leffelholtz was in part of that scene.
Are you familiar with what's called a CAD?
Yes.
And are you familiar with the CAD for this incident?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what a CAD is?
The CAD is a summary that dispatchers type in when they hear what's going on, and they enter it into a running log.
And that running log, are the times exactly what's provided by the officers?
It's around the time.
And based on your training and experience, when an officer arrives at the scene, are there different ways to advise dispatch of their arrival?
Yes.
And what are the different ways to advise their dispatch?
They can advise from a vehicle if they're whatever proximity they are to a scene. They could be have arrived and then transmitted they arrived. They could do it on their portable mic as well. It just depends where they are when they transmit.
And that would account for the times being approximate?
Yes.
Permission from Shirley. Okay, what's been marked as State's Exhibit 17. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Can you tell what it is? Tell us what it is, excuse me.
Yes, this is the CAD incident for the scene based on the case number.
And I'd ask to have Exhibit 898 shown to the witness only, please. And Lieutenant Brockway, if you can look at Exhibit 898 and review it in comparison to the CAD and let me know if it appears accurate with the times of arrival for the noted officers. $898 is what, yeah. If you need it zoomed in at all, so.
I don't. The only one I've almost through the list on this exhibit, 2320. Oh, Casey Jones. I'm not sure where I see that on the CAD. If I'm missing it.
Or not. Other than Trooper Jones,
Okay, Trooper. Yeah.
yeah, that would be on a different.
Different. Okay, I have one more to look at. Yes, those are correct.
And then the other three officers down at the bottom, although their arrival times weren't noted, their en route times, did you notice if those were on the CAD?
Yes.
And during your investigation, did you become aware of all the officers that actually responded to the scene?
Yes.
Are all those officers listed on the exhibit 898? Well, there are several, there are the officers that are listed on exhibit 898, officers that did respond to the scene.
Yes.
Your Honor, the state offers for illustrative purposes 898.
898 is submitted for illustrative purposes only.
If we can have permission to publish.
Proceed.
Lieutenant Brockway, can you please take the jury through the times of when the individuals arrived on scene? The individual officers arrived on scene, please.
Yeah, based on the transmission, 23, 24, 19 be Officer Rankin and Officer Ford, a single car. The next one is Sergeant Lim, 23, 24, 44.
And with Sergeant Lim and Rankin and Ford, are those TPD officers?
Yes.
Okay. And if you could identify the agency of the officers as you go through, please.
Yes. 232450 is Lieutenant Messinio, Pierce County. 232504, Detective Sergeant Sanders with Pierce County. 232522, Sergeant Rock with Tacoma Police. 232526. I believe that's Lakewood Police Officer Bucat. 232533, Tacoma Police Officer Madden and Warner. It's a single car. 232537. It's Tacoma Police Officer Bras. 232607, Tacoma Police Officer Chung. 232658, Trooper Casey Jones. 232721, I might mispronounce this. I'll just.
You can just spell it for the record.
Yeah, Guiardinu, and Officer Farnes, both with Tacoma Police Department.
And then the 3 officers listed at the bottom that arrived, but we didn't have the specified arrival time.
Yeah, Tacoma Officer Deere, Tacoma Officer Snyder, and Tacoma Officer Hightower.
And these are, again, just approximate times based on when they got keyed in through dispatch.
Correct.
Take it down. You spoke earlier about different interviews that occurred in this case, and I want to bring your attention to Defendant Rankin. Did you have the opportunity to interview Defendant Rankin?
Yes.
And did that occur on March 6th of 2020?
Yes.
Who was present with you during that interview? Do you recall?
Detective Helmke, Investigator Barnes with the Prosecutor's Office, Steve Meyer. I think that's it.
And was that interview audio recorded?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would like to publish the audio recording and the transcript of that recording.
Well, you haven't indicated what the exhibit numbers are.
I'm getting that, Your Honor. Thank you. For Defendant Rankin, it would be Exhibit 65A for the transcript, and the audio would be 111.
No objection.
65A is for illustrative purposes only, as I understand it. Okay, so 65A is admitted for illustrative purposes only. Exhibit 111 is admitted. Is that like on a disc or what is it?
Your Honor, we have it uploaded, ready to go, so it's easy to stop and start, but we also will have a jump drive provided for the exhibit.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you remember that when we did a transcript before, I read to you an instruction about that. I'm going to read you an instruction about this one as well. And as I understand it, if there are transcripts of any of the other officers offered, and I think there may be, this instruction applies to all that as well. I'm allowing this transcript to be used for illustrative purposes only. This means that its status is different from that of other exhibits in this case. This transcript is not itself evidence. It is one interpretation offered to assist you in understanding and evaluating the audio evidence in the case. Keep in mind that the actual evidence is the audio recordings that are admitted into evidence. Because the transcript is not evidence, this transcript will not go with you to the jury room when you deliberate. The lawyers and witnesses may use the transcript now and later on during this trial. Proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Lieutenant, before we start the audio, where did this interview take place?
The Parkland Spanaway Precinct around 140th and Pacific in Spanaway.
And the interview in its entirety was recorded, correct?
Yes.
And Your Honor, I'm going to ask that we play through page 9 and stop at 11, and I'll ask some questions. I'm going to play through page 9 and page 9, line 11, and ask some questions about what was stated, and then go through from there.
I think that it should be played in its entirety
It will be played in its entirety when
without
as we
interruption.
go through it.
Well, I'll let you do this the way you want to do it.
Thank you.
It's your examination.
Thank you.
This is Detective Sergeant Brockway with the Sheriff's Department, Pierce County. This is reference case number 20063-02251. It's March 6th of 2020. It is 12:45 hours. We're at the Parkland Spanaway Precinct. This is reference an incident that occurred on March 3rd, 2020 at 96 in Ainsworth. This interview with Tacoma Police Officer Timothy Rankin, goes by Timmy. Also present for the interview is Stephen Myers, investigator for the prosecutor's office, Keith Barnes, and Detective Helen Key. Timmy, do we have your permission to record this statement?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to take you through a couple preliminary background questions as we go through the incident. How long have you been with the city of Tacoma?
Just shy of 2 years.
And what is your current assignment with the city?
I'm a patrol officer in the 3 sector on Graveyard.
And just for the record, everybody understands this is being recorded and we have everybody's permission.
For the record, Steve Myers, yes.
Keith Barnes, yes. From Somke, yes.
Okay, in graveyard shift, what's the hours of graveyard shift?
It is 8 p.m. to 6 a.m.
And you have a partner that's assigned?
Yes. I work a 2-man car with Officer Ford.
Okay. Any additional duty assignments that you currently have?
I do not.
And prior to this, did you any other law enforcement experience or military?
Military, I was in the Army for 6 years. Started at 1st Ranger Battalion and then moved over to regular Army. Job there was infantry and got the chance to become a sniper for quite a while. And then after that, I transitioned to working for the Department of State as a security contractor for 2 years. Prior to me becoming a cop.
And what was your rank in the military?
The last rank I had was E5, Sergeant.
And how many total years? You said 6?
6.
Okay. All right. The night of the incident, what was your uniform?
I was wearing my issued police jumpsuit. I was wearing an internal vest. And my duty belt with my patrol firearm and various amounts of ammunition.
Okay. Any department hat or anything at the time?
I was wearing a department hat, yes, I was.
There's a insignia on it? And stuff?
Yes.
And then the night of the incident, after the incident, we took some photos of you here at the precinct?
Yes.
Okay. And who was driving that night and whose car were you guys in?
I was driving, and we were in my Crown Vic. It's car number 835.
So Ford's passenger. And what year is that, Vic? Do you know?
It's 2011.
Fully marked,
Fully marked, Mercy lights.
patrol car. Okay. Take us through where you were when you heard about this call or how it came about.
So we had backed Henry 317, which is Officer Collins and Officer Burbank's call sign for that night. We had backed them on a traffic stop, I would say approximately 5 to 10 minutes prior to this call coming out. The traffic stop was in the area of South 96 and A Adam Street. And we had just cleared from there, and we had went our separate ways. Officer Collins was driving. He was heading westbound on 96. We headed eastbound on 96, and then made a left on A Street and actually ran into a Pierce County deputy. We exchanged greetings, said hi to him. We saw a suspicious vehicle in the area that just had picked up 2 females on the side of the road. I followed it to about the South 84th Street and hang the right, so traveling eastbound on South 84th towards McKinley. We were running its plates. We were about to conduct a traffic stop on that vehicle due to the activities that we saw. At that same time, we heard on the radio what sounded like mic clicks. At first, when I first heard the mic clicks, I thought it was an accidental mic click, like someone accidentally hit their mic, but it continued. I think I heard approximately 3 to 4 mic clicks before dispatch asked for Henry 317, do you have traffic? At that point in time, I had slowed way down. I was probably traveling approximately 5 to 10 miles per hour. And no answer was given to dispatch when they asked for any radio traffic. The mic clicks continued. I remember dispatch asking 317, you do have traffic? And nothing was put out. We just continued to hear the mic clicks. Next thing I heard was, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm pretty sure it was Officer Burbank's voice. I would know Officer Burbank's voice pretty well because I've worked with him for over a year. He was also one of my training officers when I was going through the PTO phase. So I heard his voice, and all that came out on the radio was a location. It was 96 in Ainsworth, is all he said. His voice, I had never heard it in that tone of voice before. It sounded super stressed, almost kind of in like a panic kind of voice. In my mind, instantly when I heard that voice, I wasn't sure what was going on. I thought maybe he was in a foot pursuit, but I remember I had been in foot pursuits with Officer Burbank in the past, and he's cool, calm, collected, very good at calling out his location, even on a foot pursuit. So that immediately did not sit right with me and my partner. I immediately activated my emergency lights and sirens, flipped a U-turn on South 84th just prior to the intersection of McKinley and South 84th. I was traveling now westbound on South 84th towards Pacific Avenue. I made a left on Pacific Avenue, heading southbound. As I was making that turn, I remember dispatch saying they were going to keep the air open for Henry 317 because they had no idea what was going on. Dispatch, I think, asked them, update us when you can, but there was no updates. All we kept hearing was mic clicks. dispatch informed, I think, all of us that they were going to open up their mics just to hear what was going on. At this point in time, I was ready on Pacific, driving southbound with my lights and sirens on. What I heard over the radio was what sounded like rustling, almost like a physical altercation, and what sounded like heavy breathing. And the first thought that came across my mind due to my prior experience in the military was I was expecting, I was thinking the worst, that Officer Burbank and Officer Collins most likely were either dead or shot. I related their heavy breathing to listening to friends of mine that I lost overseas, the heavy breathing being the last few breaths before they died. So at that point in time, I tried my very best to drive there as quickly as I can, as safely as I can. And then once I got to the intersection of South 96 and Pacific Avenue, I made a right-hand turn heading westbound on South 96. Right as I made that right-hand turn, I saw Officer Collins' SUV in the distance, something that was really weird that I noticed that put a little bit more, made me want to get there slightly quicker, was that it was just in the middle of the roadway, just like it was just regularly driving, but it was stopped. Its emergency lights weren't on, only its back embers were lit, kind of just signifying it was a caution. But as we got closer to the vehicle, I think we were approximately 3 or 4 blocks out. I kept asking, I remember asking Officer Ford, I was like, do you see them? Where are they? Do you see them? And we did not see them at all, which was really unsettling, as you're coming on their vehicle and you don't see them. Finally, as I drifted off, I basically shaded off more to the right side of the SUV. I saw 3 individuals about 10, 15 feet in front of the vehicle.
Which vehicle?
In front of their patrol vehicle, almost in the intersection of South 96 and Ainsworth. And so right as we got there, I put my vehicle in park, we both ran out, and I called out on the radio that I was with 317 at the scene. As we were running towards them, what I saw was there was a black male subject that was proned out on the ground on his stomach. Officer Burbank was on top of his upper torso, straddling his upper torso, almost like he was riding a horse, with both of his hands pressed down on his upper body. And then I saw Officer Collins trying to secure both his legs, and his legs were kicked out almost like in a prone position.
Lieutenant Brockway, can you tell the jury what's meant by a prone position, what that term means?
Proned out would be face down with arms extended.
So on your stomach and your top of your thighs on the ground with your arms extended, is that?
Yes.
And is that the description that Defendant Rankin provided as far as how he first saw Mr. Ellis?
Yeah, I'd object. This would not be the proper witness to explain what Officer Rankin did.
Document speaks for itself, doesn't it, counsel?
He's conducting the interview of the witness and asked him.
He's interpreting it.
Well, you could ask him what he understood it to mean, but you can't say what.
Thank you,
Officer
Your Honor.
Rankin.
I'll rephrase. Lieutenant, what did you understand from Defendant Rankin to mean as far as Mr. Ellis's position when he first arrived?
That Mr. Ellis was on his stomach.
And what did you understand Defendant Rankin to mean as far as Officer Burbank's position on or in relation to Mr. Ellis when he was first able to visually see them?
That Officer Burbank, I'm sorry, Officer Collins repeat the question.
Asking about what did you understand Defendant Rankin to first see in relation to Defendant Burbank?
I think I think the statement does speak for itself as to this.
And Lieutenant Brockway, was it important to your investigation to know the position of Defendant Burbank in relation to Mr. Ellis?
Yeah, I'm going to object. Refers to 9 pages into a multi-page document with other witnesses and statements that come forward. It's not appropriate for you to interpret at this point in time.
I'm not asking him to interpret it, Your Honor. I'm asking him if it was something that was important for his investigation.
I also object to the rule of completeness. I think the whole document should be
Well, I suspect we're going to get there, but here's the thing. At least at this point, does Lieutenant Brockway ask a question? At the moment, there's a narrative that's being provided.
There's an extensive narrative that's being provided, Your Honor, and I'd like to break down some of that narrative with the lieutenant who was there conducting the interview.
It would make sense if what was being said then prompted a question from him. Otherwise, I don't see the reason for the interruption.
Your Honor, it's several pages of a narrative, and to be able to highlight certain areas that were being said and what those statements meant to him in his investigation.
You can, I think you can get there when he starts asking a question, or you ask him when he did something else in accordance with the investigation. Why did he do it? Well, because Officer Rankine said this, that, or the other, I suppose. If that's his reason for doing it, that's fine. I don't understand the reason for interrupting it at this moment either, unless the lieutenant did so during the course of the interview. And I haven't seen the statement, so I don't know.
And I'd like to ask you a question about, on page 5, Lieutenant Rankin indicates that they had made contact with the Pierce County deputy. Did you ever follow up on who that?
And I'm showing, Your Honor, on the same basis previously.
Page 5.
Rankin made contact with the Pierce County deputy. I'm asking if he ever followed up on identifying that deputy on his way right after their last contact.
That's on page 5?
It is on page 5, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead and ask the question. Overruled.
No.
I ask you to play through 15, page 15, line 22.
You talk about the subject's legs? You gotta describe it.
Yeah, the subject's legs. Trying to secure the subject's legs. Officer Collins was trying to secure the subject's legs. The unsettling factor to it was, to put some context to it, I've been in situations with Officer Burbank and Collins, and they both were really good officers that I look up to. Officer Burbank's about 5'9", 180 pounds approximately. Officer Collins is about 6'1", 6'2", about 210, 220 pounds. Both of them are prior service military. I know Burbank was in regular Army, and he saw a lot of stuff overseas because that's one thing we connected on and we talked about. I know Officer Collins was in 2nd Ranger Battalion, which anyone from a Ranger Battalion usually are pretty high class and high skilled individuals. Officer Collins is also on a SWAT team, Tacoma Police Department SWAT team, and he has quite a bit of jiu-jitsu background. So to see him and see this individual and that they were trying to trying to, I would say, I guess, lack of a better term, trying to hold down, just simply move and wiggle and just easily move them. I guess the only thing I could relate it to was this individual was throwing them around like rag dolls. Officer Collins was trying to secure the subject's legs, and he was having a really hard time. So as we ran up, the first thing I asked him was like, "What do you need from us?" And Officer Collins responded with, "We need hobbles." And I said, "We don't have hobbles. Let's just secure his legs. Let's help you secure his legs, and we can go from there." So I remembered Officer Collins had transitioned to the subject's left leg, and Officer Ford had jumped on his right leg, the subject's right leg. I had assisted Officer Ford in securing his right leg. And as that was happening, I was on the right side of the subject's body. I remember Officer Burbank was still on top of him, like seated on top of him. I remember Officer Burbank asking for help. I remember he saying to me, "Help me." And I said, "All right, I got you." I remembered I had transitioned up to his upper torso once we had pretty much secured his legs, even though he was still kicking and bucking pretty violently. I know both of those officers, Officer Collins and Officer Ford, were sprawled out, holding his legs subject's legs with both hands, trying not to get kicked in the face. I remember right before I transitioned to his upper torso, me and Officer Ford checked to make sure his cuffs, like his hands were completely cuffed up. I remember the handcuffs that were on him were silver Peerless handcuffs that were on him. We made sure they were completely secured so that his arms couldn't break free from the handcuffs. As we were transitioning, I remember Officer Ford asked whose Glock magazine was on his lower back, and no one answered. And I remember Officer Ford grabbing it and just tossing it because I remember seeing the magazine slide away from the subject. And as I transitioned up to the torso, me and Officer Burbank had made a plan that I was going to take the right half of his torso, of the subject's torso, and Officer Burbank was going to take the left side of the subject's torso. At the same time as we were transitioning there, I did notice that there was a taser application that had been applied. I did see the taser wires, and I saw the prongs around the upper torso region of the individual. So as I transitioned to help Officer Burbank with the torso, I placed my right knee on his right shoulder area, and then my left knee on his lower back, and securing his right arm because he still was violently thrashing around. As I was doing that, Officer Burbank moved off of him, and the individual did, I would say, I can't remember exactly, but almost like a bucking move that tossed Officer Burbank off of him pretty violently. I remember seeing Officer Burbank roll on the ground towards like the left side of his body, and that's when I jumped. I moved all my weight to the middle of his body, securing my right knee over the top of his spine, just below the base of his neck, and then my left knee in the middle of his spine on his lower back. At that point in time, I had kicked my ankles out, so I was almost in like a seated position on this individual. I was attempting to secure his left arm now, as this individual was still trying to violently thrash around. As this was going on, I remembered this subject was, he was making really strange animal grunting noises, and I thought that was super weird. And even before, like, I could even control his whole entire torso. I remember all four of us grabbing onto this individual, and as he finally, the subject finally thrashed around, I remember he was doing almost like a wiggle, like a worm. And as he was doing that, he was pulling all four of us across the roadway. I remember thinking to myself that I kind of was in a situation where I didn't really know what to do. One of the thoughts that came in my head was, this might not really end well for all of us if this one individual can take all four of us and move us, even though he was in handcuffs. And I guess kind of a side note to that was a couple days prior to that, I was in a physical fight with an individual for approximately 5 minutes that was about the same size as this individual. And I just by myself was able to successfully place the subject in custody and place him in cuffs by myself, which was really unsettling for me because this individual was throwing all four of us around, which from the prior fight, I thought we could have handled this guy, but I had doubts that this individual could have, if he was not properly restrained and properly held down, could have seriously hurt us. So once I was seated on the subject's back, placing my weight, like distributing my weight evenly across his torso, one of the things I thought was really weird was the first time I actually heard this subject even speak, and the first thing he said to me was, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. But he said it in a very, not in a distressed voice, in almost a very calm, normal voice, which I thought was super weird. I remember telling the individual, I was like, if you're talking to me, you can breathe just fine. I was like, I remember also instructing him, like, if you stop struggling with us and if you calm down, I will release some pressure off of you. And the individual got quiet. After he got quiet, I remember attempting to move my right knee to reposition it towards his right shoulder. As I was doing so, the subject violently thrashed again, almost bucking me off of him, where I ended up repositioning my knee back to the original spot in the middle of his spine, kind of upper back spine area. I remember we just sat there till other officers could get there. I'm unsure who placed hobbles on him, but I remember seeing what appeared to be like a black, like flat rope with a silver carabiner placed around his legs, and some other officers helped secure the carabiner to his handcuffs. But I was too busy trying to hold this individual down, so I did not recognize who actually placed the hobbles on him. At that point in time, I know other Tacoma officers were on scene, and I'm unclear, but I'm unclear who replaced Officer Collins, but I remember seeing in front of me was Sergeant Lynn. Sergeant Lynn asked me if I had things handled, and I remember telling him, I got this, Sarge. And I remembered he went to go talk to Officer Burbank and Officer Collins in front of their patrol vehicle. I remember Burbank's, both of their uniforms were kind of disoriented. I remember Burbank's hat was almost off of his head. I remember both of them looking at each other and looking at each other's faces. And I overheard what they were telling Sergeant Lynn, that they both had been struck in the face by the subject. I remember Officer Burbank showing Sergeant Lynn kind of like the left side of his mouth where he had been struck. And after that, I turned my attention back to the individual, to the subject that we had. I instructed, I can't remember which other TP officers that were there, but I instructed them to roll him towards his right side.
Lieutenant Brockway, based on that section of the interview with Defendant Rankin, what was your understanding of whether or not Mr. Ellis was cuffed at the time that Defendant Rankin made contact with him?
This statement speaks for itself. If you can reference your example.
Your Honor, he's the lead detective.
That doesn't make any difference. If it said something to do with what he did, then I can understand that. I'm not sure if that's the case. So what I'm going to do at this point, because we're actually past our breaking point, is I will excuse the jury and we can continue this conversation. Maybe I can find out some more. So, ladies and gentlemen, please excuse us. Please do not discuss the case. The statement.
This is about an hour-long interview.
Okay. So what's the significance at this point to the detective about where he thought the hands were, or whether the handcuffs were on?
Whether or not Mr. Ellis was detained at the time, and the use force that was applied to him, and the pressure that was applied to him, all that's relevant to a homicide investigation, Your Honor. And the timing of that, and the position of...
But I haven't heard anything about that yet. I mean, at least about the pressure and that kind of stuff.
Well, they interviewed, Defendant Rankin talks about he put pressures on him, put his knee on the back of his, low on the base of his neck,
Yeah.
and then on the other knee on his spine, and he kicked his legs out, his feet out from underneath him, put all of his weight on him.
It's all in the statement. So what I'm asking is, what's it got to do with this witness?
The significance of the statement to him, because he's investigating the death, and if this is
Fine, but you're asking him.
you could ask what relevance, if any, it had to his investigation, if the court prefers it to be phrased that way, but I need to direct him to the information that I'm asking. The timing of it, and it's also goes to the questions that he needs to have answered.
Well, presumably he asked him more questions during the course of the interview.
He asked him some during the course of the interview, yes.
Your Honor, these guys gave voluntary statements, breaking it up this way to try to emphasize certain aspects or ask what the detective is thinking. Simply isn't appropriate at this time. If she wants to ask afterward, that might make sense, but during the middle of the interview is not appropriate. It's just not.
I agree, Your Honor. I've never seen this done before. I don't understand its purpose. This is a statement that the jury's following along on a transcript. These are voluntary statements from our clients. And to stop and basically interject what the prosecutor thinks or wants to portray to the jury is just inappropriate and unfair.
Your Honor, as the court mentioned prior to starting the playing of the audio, the state has the discretion to present the evidence how it wishes to present it, and to go through after, I think this is over almost 40 pages, and then go back through and say, oh, let's go through this page, and this statement, and this statement, whereas the jurors just heard it, and asking the questions close in time. I'm telling the court, we're gonna play the whole thing, so there's no rule of completeness issue, there's no prejudice to defense, they certainly have an opportunity to cross-examine. This is just the state going through the statement and what significance it had.
I don't see any problem with you stopping the thing from time to time to ask some kind of clarifying issue with respect to this witness. But if he's not interrupting, what's the point of stopping it? I don't get it. It's not telling us, you just heard X in the video or in the audio recording. And you were there. And so then you asked this question, why did you do that? Maybe. He says, I was confused about what he was saying. I thought maybe he meant this, and I wasn't sure maybe he meant this other thing, or even a third thing. So I asked a clarifying question. Okay. That kind of thing I see, but what's the point of stopping in the meantime? Unless it had, and again, if it had something to do with, I heard him say this in the interview, whatever it is, and because of that, I talked to so-and-so, or I did some other matter in an investigation. That might make some sense too. But why interrupt? He's going to come up at the end anyway.
The purpose for interrupting, Your Honor, is because there's multiple places within the interview in which Defendant Rankin talks about the pressure that was on, that he was putting on Mr. Ellis's back, the fact that he couldn't breathe, the information that was available to him, and Lieutenant Brockway is investigating.
Yeah, but he doesn't know how much pressure was put on unless he can say, unless you're asking him now when Officer Rankine was saying this to you, did he demonstrate how this was done? Did he quantify the amount of pressure in any sort of way? Because otherwise we can all hear the video or the audio and make our own conclusions from it.
The lieutenant is the one that's doing the investigation, and this is relevant information for his investigation.
What's relevant information?
That Defendant Rankin placed his knee on the spine.
He says that.
And I can ask him, why is that significant to his investigation?
Well, you could ask him if it is significant, I suppose. And then he could say yes and why, and then he could tell you why. Well, why stop now? That's all going to be there at the end anyway.
There's a lot to go through, Your Honor, with an hour-long interview, and for clarification on highlighting why it's important to his investigation.
But it wasn't anything he was doing at the time.
And he's in a unique position versus the jurors. This is the first time they're hearing it, and they don't know what's significant and what's not to the investigation.
Oh, I think they've got some clue as to what's significance in this case after 2 weeks of trial, 3 almost, of testimony, and hearing all the things from the a pathologist, a cardiologist, and individuals who witnessed all this and the videos. And I mean, I don't think there's any surprise here.
So just for clarification, Your Honor.
And of course, the brilliant opening statements of all the counsel.
For going forward, for going forward, if there's something that he asked a question for clarification on, I can ask about that. But if
I
there's,
suppose.
but pretty much everything else is off the table until the.
Well, until you get to the end, and then it's like, okay, so I heard this during the thing. Did you hear that too? Yeah, I did. So what did it mean to you in terms of your investigation? Kind of thing. Right? Yeah.
We'll go forward.
Great. Okay. We're at a break.
probably hear it in the jury room.
She was yelling?
Yes.
What was she yelling?
She was upset about being poor, Mr. Ellis being poor and black, and this was unfair, and then just yelling about the officer Ranking's statement. I didn't listen too closely, except it was just extremely loud. I came in immediately and let the state know, hey, we don't want a mistrial here. I understand it's emotional, but please ask her to go upstairs or downstairs so that the jury doesn't hear this. I took my time, went to the bathroom, came back. She was still doing it, and Mr. Osser said he could hear her yelling here in the courtroom, which suggests to me that the jurors can hear it. And we don't want a mistrial here, I assume. And so we can't have it. And so I want to make that record.
Ms. Teclavo, do you know anything about this?
Sorry, go ahead.
Ms. Eeks.
I mean, we went out there after Mr. Arbon's raised it. She's really upset and she's crying. And so there were a number of people out there trying to console her. And it's just too much for her to listen to this statement. And she got very upset about it. So I think she's calmed down. We talked to her about just staying out so that she doesn't come in the courtroom and have to listen to the rest of it. But she's not yelling as if she's angry, and she's certainly not trying to do anything to impact anybody. She's just really emotionally overwrought, hearing the statement, understanding it's her brother, and she's obviously struggling with that.
Your Honor, I would note that I went into the hallway between our courtroom and the juror's room, and I was not able to hear anything from.
Well, that's good. But obviously that's a problem. Did you talk to her about trying to avoid these kinds of issues by going to another location farther away?
We were trying to calm her, as the court knows she has a walker, and we're trying to calm her down and get a victim advocate to come sit with her and take her and not bring her into the courtroom. She understandably feels like she's let her brother down if she's not here, and we told her, she doesn't need to torture herself by coming in here and listening to it. So, my understanding is she's calmed down, and she's not gonna bring that in the courtroom.
Okay, well, I mean, I hope she's able to do that. I don't want to, we want her to be able to attend just as much of the trial as she wants to attend. That's the goal. But if this trial is to be effective, we can't have the jurors being exposed to this kind of thing. And, there's only so much we can do in terms of physical spacing people out. One of the reasons we have the jurors in the courtrooms, in the jury deliberation of the courtroom that's next door, as opposed to the one that's for this courtroom, is to reduce that possibility. But if that's not sufficient, then we don't want to have to move the jurors to a different floor. It's already taking up enough time just getting them back and forth into this courtroom as it is because of that. And given the time issues with respect to this trial already that Ms. Eeks described a few days ago, that's a problem. So certainly we want her to be here. We want her to be comfortable, but we do want her to be able to, if she gets emotional, which is, one can't always control that. She has to at least be aware of the fact that she needs to distance herself from the jurors. And if she gets loud enough, it may not be sufficient to just be here on the main floor, the third floor.
And Your Honor, we'll have that conversation again with her, and we'll also figure out a time to sit down with the victim advocate to have this discussion.
Yeah, no, these are difficult things for everybody, and I'm certainly sympathetic to her concern, but I think she knows we have to conduct business too. Okay. Are we ready for the jury? Okay, thank you. Let's have the jury. So yeah, we need to stop at 4 o'clock sharp. And Mrs. Winnie reminds us that one of the jurors has got a 4:30 appointment, so we need to stop at 4 so they can get there on time.
Your Honor, there's about 35 minutes left of the audio, so it should be.
Okay, well, that should maybe time out about right. Welcome back, everybody. Please be seated. Continue when you're ready, Ms. Nicolavo.
Roll the subject towards his right side. And something that was really weird about this subject was that he was wearing if I remember correctly, but not exactly, but I remembered him wearing kind of a red sweatshirt. But him wearing a sweatshirt, like just touching him, he was really warm to the touch. His head had beads of sweat coming down from it, and he was sweating profusely. I did not know it at the time till later on when I had taken off my patrol gloves to transition to rubber medical gloves. My gloves were completely soaked and wet and wasn't raining out at all. And I would assume that my gloves were wet from just this individual because I was hands-on with him the whole entire time. But once I took control of the situation, I instructed the officers to rotate him to the right side, the subject's right side, so we could conduct a weapon sweep on him. I was unclear whether a weapon sweep was ever conducted on him. I was not going to take the chance that he had a weapon on him and was able to break free and grab the weapon. So we rolled him to the right side, the subject's right side. I conducted a weapon sweep on him around his waistband area. I sweep both his pockets in the front. He was wearing sweatpants. I want to say it's probably black sweatpants. I remember he was wearing white Jordans. I swept him. He didn't have anything in his pockets or in his waistband. Swept his back. He didn't have anything. And I remember seeing the taser probes in him. One was on his left side towards around his rib area. The probes did not, from me pulling them out, I did not notice that they were embedded in his skin. They were just more embedded into his jacket that he was wearing. And then the second probe was located around his left chest area, which we both removed, which I removed, checked to make sure by policy, the needles were completely taken out, no barbs were still in him. And I think, if I remember correctly, but I'm unsure on this, Officer Ford helped me secure the probes and the wiring. By policy, we have to, every time a ECT application's applied, we have to secure the cartridge, the probes, and the wiring for evidence. So I know Officer Ford is one of the officers that helped secure that. Once we had removed the probes, the subject was still laying on his right side. I was trying to talk to the individual, but as I was trying to talk to him, he violently started thrashing all over again. So I instructed the officers to roll him back on his stomach as we reapplied pressure on him just to hold him down. I remember, I guess one of the things that I also remembered was that minutes into me and Officer Ford getting there, and once I had gained control of his upper torso, I remember Officer Ford getting on the radio and calling for TFD to come to the scene, and I think the reason why it was by policy, every time an ECT application is applied, we have to get TFD to clear the individual.
That's the fire department?
Yeah, the fire department for clear the individual, and sometimes they remove the probes if we have not removed it ourselves. But also the subject, he was bleeding. He had like minor cuts in his face, and he was bleeding from his face. The subject's hands, when I was looking at him, there were his knuckles, around his knuckles area and around his, like the palms was pretty bloody. I couldn't really tell the injury that was on his hands, but I remember them being really bloody. So once we had rolled him back over on his stomach and reapplied pressure on him, just to hold him down to fire could get there. I remember Sergeant Lim getting on the radio and asking what's fire's ETA to our location, and dispatch responding with I'll check. And at the same time, I can't remember which TPD officer was the one that said this, but he said something on the lines of all times, fire was to run priority. They're not running priority now. And I remember someone had said that they saw fire, I think it was engine 10 that was first on scene, making the right-hand turn from Pacific and driving westbound on 96 with just no lights, just almost like on an everyday cruise to our location. Only after, I think, dispatch informed them that we needed them priority, because I think Sergeant Lim had told dispatch after that we needed them priority to the scene, that they then activate their lights, but they were already, I don't know, just a few blocks away from us, which I thought was really strange, for fire to pull up on scene and see numerous cop cars there, and then them just kind of rolling up all slow-like to our scene. So at that point in time, I still had control of the guy's upper body. My right knee was around the right shoulder blade area of him, and my left knee was on the middle of his back still. He was not thrashing around as much anymore. His head was turned to the left side of his body. I did notice that his breathing was still the same, was breathing. I could see his chest rise and fall. And as fire was getting there, I made the decision to roll him back onto the subject's right side. Again, just because from my medical training experience, that's the best position to put someone. It's like the recovery position is what they called it. So I rotated back on the right side, and I checked his pulse using his carotid on his neck. I remember something that was really weird about his pulse was that his pulse was quite normal. It was approximately 80 beats per minute. I checked it with two of my fingers on his carotid and his neck. Again, after a minute or two had passed, I checked it again. I remember saying out loud, "Well, that's really weird that his pulse is completely normal." And then at that same time, fire was just walking up towards us. I asked the first firefighter that was there, I remembered seeing his last name on his jacket was Wilson. I said, "What do you need from us?" And he said, "I need him on his back." So we had rotated the subject on his back. He was still in hobbles and cuffs. The first thing fire did was they cut his clothes. I think they cut part of his pants and his shirt completely open. They attached leads to his body, to I think it was the heart rate monitor. And then I remember asking fire, I was like, "Okay, what else do you need from us?" And the firefighter, Wilson, he said, "We need him out of cuffs and out of this hobble. I need an arm for an IV or he's going to code." And I remember looking at him and then looking at Sergeant Lim, and I said, "Sarge, you good with this?" And he kind of looked at me, and I informed the firefighter, I was like, "We just fought him for a long period of time." I was like, "I don't want to get him out of cuffs in case he starts fighting again." And then fire advised me that he really needed to put an IV in. So Sergeant Lim gave me the go-ahead to take the hobbles off and take the cuffs off. Other TPD officers assisted me in taking off the hobbles and the handcuffs on him. And once we had that that taken off, we assisted fire by standing around, making sure that this individual was not going to, get back up and start fighting or, was going to harm the firefighters that were there. I remember the firefighter, Wilson, did get an IV placed into his left arm, and they started a IV bag on him. I remember him instructing the other firefighter that was kind of like kneeled around his head to start to attach pads to him in case he started coding. And then the firefighter instructed the firefighter to start bagging him, which simply just is the airbag to put around his mouth and help him breathe. At that point in time, I could still see like the individual's eyes were wide open. His chest was still rising and falling. He was still breathing on his own. And then I would say, I don't know the timeline exactly, but maybe a couple seconds to a minute or so. While they were bagging him, they asked for assistance for us to start CPR on him. Officer Warner with Tacoma started CPR on him for approximately a minute or two before I took over. And then I was doing CPR on the subject. I also recall that at that point in time, one of the firefighters had called for additional firefighter for, I think, paramedics and another fire unit to be on scene. I'm unsure how long I did CPR on the subject. I would say between a couple minutes to a few minutes. I remember the firefighters giving him at least 3 doses of epinephrine, trying to get the subject, going of some sort. And then once the other units, once the medic 1 arrived and tower 2 arrived, the firefighters all came and relieved us, and I stopped CPR, and then the firefighters took over after that.
Okay. And did that end your involvement from there?
That ended my involvement from there. The next thing I did was just set up crime scene tape and blocking positions or traffic control because we were unsure how long fire was going to be working on this individual. And we were instructed by Sergeant to basically block off the whole intersection so that fire could work on him. And then the only other thing else after that I did was I assisted, I think, one of the lieutenants for Pierce County who had a fingerprint reader because we had a call for a fingerprint reader because the individual did not have any ID on him. I know one of the other officers was trying to run a kind of a search for his tattoos. The individual had 2 tattoos on his forearms. Try to run a search for his tattoos to try to identify the subject. But once I think they were successful to get a name and a date of birth for the subject, that was put on a Post-it note and handed to me by Sergeant Lim. And I went back to my patrol car, researched the individual by checking Washington State DOL to match up his DOL photo with the subject to make sure it was him. We also me and Officer Ford conducted a global check on him, which the subject has been previously booked in the Pierce County Jail, and his tattoos were documented. So we made sure to match up his tattoos with the prior documented cases he had, and so we could confirm that it was actually this individual. Once we knew for 100% that the subject was the name provided by us by the Pierce County Lieutenant, I provided that name to Tacoma Fire. because at that point in time they only knew him as John Doe. And then after that, I was instructed to come to Pierce County Substation and get processed. That's about it.
Okay. We took photos and then taking your taser for that night.
Yep.
When Burbank and his partner do the previous traffic stop, and then you check on a suspicious vehicle, how long a time frame do you think until you heard mic clicks and all that and that go on?
I would say anywhere from about 5 minutes to 10 minutes. It wasn't even that long. It cannot have been that long. I would say a couple minutes at the least, but 10 minutes at the most. But I don't recall it for sure.
Did you guys check out on that traffic stop that you assisted?
Yeah, so we had both cleared out of the traffic stop. So we both had cleared. That's when we broke contact from both from Henry 317, and they had already left the traffic stop heading a different direction, and we were heading a different direction. So that traffic stop had nothing to do with the whole incident. It was just the only reason why I brought it up was because that was my prior contact with Henry 317, Officer Burbank Collins, prior to us assisting them on this incident.
And was there? You didn't do the other suspicious vehicle contact that you talked about?
No, we did not.
You just ran the plate?
We just ran the plate.
Okay. And what was your call sign that night?
Henry 031.
031. Okay. And when the mic clicks, just for reference, when somebody keys up a mic on a portable, radio dispatch knows the name of that person?
Yes.
Did you know if they ever officially did the open mic and let it open?
From what I remembered, from what I recalled, dispatch said they were going to keep their mics open. That's when I heard that scuffling and that heavy breathing.
Okay. How's the lighting conditions when you're coming down westbound and behind them? How are the lighting conditions for that area?
It was so 96 is well lit. Where Officer Burbank and Collins and the subject were was right. It's like 10, 15 feet in front of that patrol vehicle. So they were in the middle of the intersection. If I use this map as a reference here, they were kind of in the driveway, located just, I guess, north of the intersection, kind of like almost in line with where the driveway was, and there was a street light on either side, so it was well lit, but we did not see them until we got closer to them. Then we could make them out. At first, all I saw was Officer Collins's legs like kicked out towards the curb when we first got closer to them. And then once we got out of the vehicle, we were able to see where they actually were.
And how's the weather that night and temperature-wise?
So temperature was cold. I don't know the exact temperature. It was chilly, and it was not raining. It had rained, I think, a couple hours prior, but the road was damp, but it was not soaking wet by any means. Yeah.
And as you approach to assist, is the subject handcuffed at that point, or?
I was unsure.
Not sure.
I was unsure because of the way the subject was moving and the reaction that Officer Collins, Officer Burbank had. He was, for lack of a better term, it looked like Officer Burbank was just riding a wild horse and hanging on for dear life. And Officer Collins was trying as hard as he could to secure both of the legs of the subject. At that time, I did not know if he was properly cuffed or not. I did not know that till I actually was able to rotate towards his torso. Then I noticed that his hands were behind his back. That's when we checked to make sure that he was properly handcuffed. That's all I remember.
And as part of your military experience in the Ranger Battalion, how much training do you have on first aid? And
So when it comes to medical aid, so just regular Army, like combat life-saving course, I've done multiple of that from the military. Something that I would say is also good of note, when I was in sniper section, I was attached to a bunch of special forces units. One of the things that I took it upon myself, was to learn as much as I could from special forces medics, specifically the medic from 7th Group that we were attached to. And reason being was I had lost a lot of friends overseas. And one thing I made it a point for myself was to never let another friend die if I could do anything about it. So I learned as much medical stuff as I could. With the Department of State, we had to learn TCCC, which is technically Combat Casualty Care, which is a level slightly higher than Combat Lifesaver. A part of that too with the Department of State, they gave us the training for our EMTBs. Because of the Department of State, we were strictly working between a 3 to 5 man unit. If one of us was to go down, we were able to assist each other with first aid to the point that we learned how to crike people by cutting their necks open and putting a tube down it for airway. We knew, how to bag people. We learned quite significant amount of stuff that when it comes to like trauma care, I definitely knew quite a bit, but I won't say no, I don't know everything. I know quite a bit. With this subject, the first thing I did was to check his pulse to make sure he was still breathing on his own, check his pulse. I remember like asking an officer if his eyes were open, and his eyes were open. I remember maybe a week ago, there was an individual that had crashed out on a bicycle, and he was unconscious. And I remember the first thing I did was check his pulse, check his eyes, because the eyes can tell whether he has like brain trauma or if he's like suffering of some kind of like his body's in distress. His eyes tend to like roll back in the head, be unresponsive. This individual was not like that. His pulse was normal. His eyes were wide open. So all the signs were not there, which I thought was really weird that, his pulse was normal after he just fought two officers and then 4 officers and struggled with 4 officers and could still move us. And usually, I would say that most people's pulse would be kind of elevated and his heart rate should be in the 120s, 130s, but it was calm and normal, which I thought was really, really strange.
And did you hear commands being given by, or did you give commands yourself to him during the incident?
So I did give commands to him. I know when I was rotating towards his upper torso, I remember when he started to buck all 4 of us and started to move with all 4 of us, I remember telling him to stop. Like, stop, calm down, stop, calm down. I remember the next instruction I gave him was when he was saying that he cannot breathe. And I told him, if you're talking to me, you can breathe just fine. If you relax and you stop doing what you're doing, I'll let off some pressure. And then as I try to let off some pressure, he just got back to struggling with us. So that did not happen. That's the only commands I really gave him.
Okay. Other than what he said about not breathing, any other words that you made out from him?
No.
Okay. You talked about some growling and other...
Yeah, besides the growling and like the animal noises.
Do you know once the probes are removed where they go, or who handles all that?
If I remember right, I can't be exact, but I think Officer Ford was the one that grabbed onto him.
Ford took him, okay.
Because I was the one that removed them, checked to make sure. I remember looking at the barbs. The barbs were still intact, but there was like no blood, which usually with the ECT, the barbs go into your skin, and usually there's a little bit of blood on them, but there was no blood on the ECT probes.
Okay. And did you get injured at all, or any thing on you, or
No.
the next day or anything?
No, my knees are a little sore from sprawling out and, trying to hold down the subject. And as he bucked us, he kind of dragged us along the road. That's basically minor pains, but that's about it.
So it sounds like he was on his stomach during the hobble for a time, rolled to his right side, and then back down the stomach, and then back to the right again. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, and this may be hard to estimate. Any idea how long he's on his stomach hobbled?
I can tell you.
Okay.
So, did you recognize this person at all?
I did not recognize this person at all.
Never saw him?
Never saw him.
Okay. And as far as your actions there, other than sitting on him and trying to restrain him, did you use any other type of force on him?
Nope.
Did you deploy any of your weapons, taser?
I did not.
Handgun, nothing?
I did not.
Okay. And so mostly just your body pressure and trying to grab him?
Yes.
Okay.
Did anything seem effective for what was going on, and it sounded like he was able to buck people off and such. Is anything effective as far as force?
As far as force, no. I think we all were just hanging on to him. I mean, I can only speak for myself. I was definitely only hanging on to the subject for just basically trying to pin him down, hoping that he would tire out, so that he would stop, fighting us. But that's the only thing that kind of worked, was when we all, it didn't really work that well, but all four of us basically held him down. He was slightly more compliant once we got hobbles on him, but he still was able to just wiggle, and he would just kind of kick us off with him pretty easily.
Even while hobbled?
Yep.
When you said you came off the avenue onto 96 as you're heading back to them, you said you saw his ambers. Are you talking about the overhead amber?
Yeah, the overhead amber. So it's just like his ambers that were going were like just
Who's his?
Officer Collins' patrol vehicles. Their ambers were going, and it was just the simple caution where it just leads out, in and out. It was only in the overhead that was going off, which I thought was really weird, because if it was a subject stop or if it was any kind of other incident, they would activate the emergency lights, but the emergency lights was not activated. It was just the rear flashers or rear ambers flashing like a caution. That was it.
Are you talking about the one in the back window?
Theirs is the actual bar.
It's on the bar. Is that only visible from the back?
It's only visible in the back.
Okay. If you just real quick draw us a diagram of where the vehicle was as you approached, where Collins' vehicle was, and where the subject was when they were wrestling with him.
And where you stopped your vehicle?
Okay.
Yeah, just kind of, you can put a north on there, and intersection and such.
We got Ainsworth.
Yeah.
Draw an arrow right there too, instead of just drawing arrows, yeah.
Do you want me to draw the officers too?
If you recall where they're at, sure. If you want to put
Just as circles or something?
Yeah.
yeah, if you want to put last name or whatever, you come to a call sign, just so we can.
Signify the front of 317, the car, the front of it. Maybe put an arrow or a little.
Oh, like direction of travel?
Yeah, just
like a triangle or
front
something.
of it is.
Like a,
You know, like a greater than sign.
So like,
There you go.
do that?
There you go. Yeah. This would be less than.
Page and a half left on.
Okay, well, go ahead and finish it.
Just for the record, it's less than.
I know. I just realized that for a second.
Yeah, that's about it.
Okay.
I guess.
yeah, just your street names are.
There you go. Put a date in your initials somewhere up there.
Today's the 6th of March. Okay. Any other details you can help us out with?
No, 'cause that's, I mean, I remember most of it fairly clearly, even to like the finite detail of the handcuffs and what kind of handcuffs were they and the hobble. I don't know where the hobble went. I don't know who placed them on there because I was facing the other direction, trying to secure his upper torso. But under that, I mean, that's as best as I can recall. Yeah.
Do you know if anything was removed from his person?
No, nothing was removed from this person besides fire cutting off his clothes. That was it.
So you never took anything out of his pockets or anything like that?
Nope.
Okay.
All right. Is everything today you told us the truth?
Yes, sir.
And we didn't make any threats or promises to influence your statement?
No, sir.
Okay. The time is 13:40 hours, and on this statement, still March 6th, 2020.
Okay, I gather that concludes the video, or audio rather. All right, it is now 4 o'clock, so we'll take our break till tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, please discuss case among yourselves, about till tomorrow, till Monday. I'll be here though, you can come in if you like. Anyway, please do not discuss case among yourselves with anyone else. Do not permit anyone to discuss case with you in your presence, and of course avoid any report of this case on social media or otherwise. Again, those in the back with listening devices, please leave those on the seats, and we'll see you on Monday.